The J&J Podcast. I'm Jeff Day.
John Colford.
Yes, veteran missionaries. Or your current missionary, right, John?
Yes, sir. 8 years full-time and going back and forth for the last 4 years. Malawi, Africa.
I'm Jeff Day. 8 years in the little village of Kaltag in Alaska, located on the Yukon River. We are coming to you from the heart of Alaska at the In-True Studio in Fairbanks. Well, we're here today talking all things Ukraine on the J&J Podcast. I have the privilege of being with Tom Wickwire. Tom was a recent visitor to Ukraine, and he's willing to share with us some of the things that he bumped into over there and some of the experiences that he had. Tom, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you being here. And boy, I got real excited when I heard that you went to Ukraine. And the reason that is exciting is because Tom's not affiliated with anybody immediately associated with Bible Baptist Church here in Fairbanks. He knows the missionary, and he has a love for God, and he saw a need, and he jumped in the middle of it. And that's what I wanted to try to put on the air and record today, just because we're trying to get people out of the pews to get over there and help out with these missionaries and help out with individuals that are going through a pretty hard time. Tom, for the listeners here, could you share with us how you came to know the Lord Jesus as your Savior, when it was, and who you are?
Sure. I was raised in a Presbyterian home with my father and mother were good Presbyterians, good marriage, and they dragged me to Presbyterian church every year. And I never heard why I was going. I was struggled. I wanted to go out in the woods and play. And I never heard a single message about how you establish a relationship with Jesus.
Right.
Then when I was 16 or 17, a friend of mine was a Catholic, and we argued about everything and for days and days. And finally, on one particular day in 1960, I decided to change the mess that I'd made in my life and give my life over to the Lord and follow him. And from that day on, I started praying, and most of the time following the Lord. Made a few mistakes, got off the rails a few times, but the Lord taught me real lessons about how he didn't give me justice. He gave me grace, because many things that I did for the first 3 or 4 years could have just stopped my progress in life completely if I'd have been caught and held responsible for it. But the Lord had grace and mercy. Then finally later, I got a little more on the straightened path, still made a few medium-sized mistakes, but no real falling off the rails after that. And after about 12 years of being a Catholic, I had a good friend who'd been a Catholic and quit, and he talked me into quitting and getting close to the Lord Jesus and reading the Bible and getting into a different church. So I did.
Right.
That was the end of my Catholic church experience. And after that, I attended churches that were Bible-believing. I guess you'd call them evangelical, charismatic. I went to Door of Hope for a while, and Lighthouse first, Door of Hope for a while. And now I'm into a fellowship that is taught by Will Mayo. It's small, but I like the fact that it's about half Native, half white, and I really have a heart for the Native people and how difficult it is for them to accept what's happened to the nation. But that's kind of a side issue.
Sure.
So my heart goes out to the
I'm with
the last
you. You're talking my language. 8 years
Right.
a missionary in the village of Keltag is what I did.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Good for you.
Boy, you see some of the, we could do a whole podcast just on that. And that's what I wanted to do was thank you very much for sharing that with us here. And you're part of a fellowship now that's in a home.
Yeah, well, it meets in my place because they've got a big enough place, and it's
Sure.
6 to 12 to 15 people.
Sure.
About half Native, half white, and it's led by Will Mayo. He's
A believer.
deeply educated. Well, he went to Bible school for college for 4 or 5 years and was pastor of Door of Hope for a while. So anyways, he's got deep understanding of the scriptures, and he studies and teaches us, even though we're a small group. That doesn't bother him. So I feel real comfortable there.
Amen. All that being said, you just got back, I should say, recently from Ukraine.
Yes.
You guys, from what we've talked earlier, and you bumped into the missionary we know over there, John O'Brien.
Yes.
or here, I should say, when he was here.
Yes, before I left.
And John, he's in working out of Kharkov there, and he's right on the eastern side where all of the action is. And John, you've heard, in previous podcasts, you can hear he's really effective, and that's who we're trying to help get people in country delivering food. And in previous podcasts, you can catch up on that. But it's interesting your paths crossed because you had a heart to supply a ambulance.
Yes.
For the
First,
go ahead.
I'm not an evangelist.
I'm not running ahead of you here.
I'm not an evangelist, but I have for decades supported evangelists, especially persecuted Christians. If you're familiar with Brother Andrew, he was somebody that starting in about 1960 was smuggling Bibles into the Iron Curtain every place. And I supported him for many years. And so when I saw the war happening, I thought, well, these are a bunch of persecuted, suffering people, and many of the Christians, I didn't know how many, but supporting people that are persecuted, especially Christians, is something that really touches my heart, even though I haven't done very much direct evangelism where I try to corner people and ask them what their relationship with Jesus is or not. People are called to do that, and I'm not one. Every once in a while, I come across an occasion where I can do that. But that is part of what motivated me. And another one was, for many years, I've looked at World War II and thought that America got in too late. And I thought, if I was a young man, 20 years old in 1940, what would I have been doing? So that's the way I look at history.
Interesting.
And that's the way I look at this Ukrainian war. And I think that if this turns out to be a major contest between the spread of democracies, or if it loses, the spread of dictatorships and the cruelty that they bring, then I want to be able to say, no matter how long I live, if this war is talked about in 20, 50 more years like World War II is, I want to be able to say, I didn't just sit home where it was nice and comfortable. What I did what I could. I mean, I'm not a soldier and I'm too old for doing anything like that, but at least I did what I could. I got up and moved and went over there. And then this opportunity with another man to buy this ambulance. It was a used ambulance in Poland for about $14,000. And I said, yes, I'm good for that. If you can find one, I'm good for it. Then a week or two later, this man in New Mexico called me up and said, we found one. It's in Katowice, Poland. We'll buy it if you go get it and take it into Ukraine. I said, yeah, I'm good for that. So
hang on. You just decided one day to say, here, it's one thing just to give the money. It's another thing to say, hey, I'll go over there and I'll drive it. Have you been to Poland before?
No.
Have you been out of the country before?
I'd been to Russia 9 times in a 6-year period where I eventually adopted a boy. So I knew what it was like living in a country that was getting away from communism, but still had the vestiges of it.
When was the last time you were in Russia?
2007.
I'm only drawing this because now we're in 2023, and there was a whole lot of years in between there, but you didn't hesitate once you took what you had and ran with it.
Right. Well, by 2007, I knew that Putin's Russia was not a place for me. And once I barely got that adoption done before he shut down all adoptions by Westerners. And
people forget that he slammed the door on Christians, churches in general,
and adoptions by any Westerners, especially Americans.
Yeah.
But mine got through just in time. So I adopted this boy, and he still lives with me, and he's doing fine. But after 2007, I didn't want to go to Russia anymore. But the man who got me going there is a Messianic Jew who's got a very powerful ministry and a heart for God. His name is Alex. And so he happened to call me, because separate from actually a month or two before the contact for the ambulance person, and told me that he wanted to go to Ukraine, and his daughter, who was about to enter med school in September, had already been there at least once, and she was staying in Poland. She didn't go to Ukraine, but he wanted to take her to Poland, where they were helping out refugees, and see if he could encourage her to actually go into Ukraine and get a little closer to where the real problems, and also when there's big problems, there's big opportunities. So he said he was going, and would I go? And I said yes. So the Alex and his contact with wanting to go to Poland and Ukraine just happened to coincide with this opportunity to buy the ambulance with this other man. So those two things happened to happen. So late April is when I went.
Coincidence or God?
God.
Thank you.
There are very few coincidences.
Exactly.
Very few coincidences. And this was not one of them. And there were several more during the trip that I called divine appointments, where I couldn't have got the ambulance in there if it hadn't been for God opening the door where it looked like it was closed in the natural.
I'll jump on this opportunity because you shared with me some of the stuff at the border, how it took you a year and a half to get through the border.
Oh, yes.
A ton of time. But we just had, if you go to the J&J website, podcast website, you would find we have a section there with just Ukraine, and it has testimonies from John O'Brien, who was just going through the whole deal at the border, and it was a miracle from God that he was able to get through the border with a vehicle. You should go check that out here. But Tom, not to cut you off, but I cut you off there. Go ahead.
When we talk about my experience at the border?
Please. Oh, yeah, I'm sure you had a rough go with
Okay.
Yeah, please share with us how God stepped in.
I got the border, paid for it in Katowice, and then kind of an aside is it was at a Subaru dealer, and I went there, and they were already ready for it. It was already paid for. We had to do the paperwork that got it registered in my name. And here's where the devil tried his best. He thought it was best. The same dealer that had the used ambulance had a brand new Ferrari. Black, not a speck of dust on it. And I had to walk past it. I could even smell the leather seats coming out. But I said, I had to tell the devil, sorry, if I was 18, you might have had me, but I'm too old for that now. Sorry, devil. I'm not buying that Ferrari. So I finally got the ambulance. Just the leathers, right? Enough of that. So anyway, I got the paperwork all done at somewhere at noon or 1 o'clock on one day and started driving towards the border. And I got the border at 8 or 9 o'clock that night, and stopped there and got all my paperwork out. And you have to get permission by the Polish government to leave and permission by the Ukrainian government to enter. So the Polish government looked at all the paperwork I had, about 20 pages, and said, no good. Your insurance expired 10 days ago, and none of these papers have the license plate of the vehicle demonstrated on them. So I had to go back to this hotel that I had arranged about 10 miles back, and it's called the Primazil. And I went back there, and by the time I got there, it was 12:30 at night. They were closed, so I had nobody to contact there. So for the first time, I pulled out the sleeping bag and pad that I threw in as an afterthought, and I slept in the ambulance. Then I got up the next morning when they woke up, when they got the hotel going at 8 o'clock. I checked in and had breakfast, and then went there and had a nap and a shower and looked over the paperwork again. And I realized other papers do show that the insurance exists through the end of May, and that the license plate does appear on some of the paperwork. So I'll just go back to the border and try again. So I told the hotel I might be back, I might not. So okay, we understand. So I went back to the border this time, and after about a half hour, an hour, the Polish government let me through. Then I was at least in Ukrainian soil, but only by 50 feet. Then I had to satisfy their requirement, which was new, which is they'd had a lot of trouble with people bringing in vehicles, claiming they're going to a charitable, nonprofit, or humanitarian aid organization, skipping the rather high import duty. So to cut off the abuses of that, they required me to show that I am giving this ambulance to a registered under Ukrainian law, a nonprofit organization. Well, I didn't have one, but I did have John O'Brien's phone number in my phone. So I called him and said, this is the problem.
Wait, you had John O'Brien's number in your pocket,
He
in
was,
your phone, because you met him here,
yes, he was here in Fairbanks for some medical work.
which was, again, just a coincidence,
Yes,
right?
just a coincidence.
Just adding them up here.
Right. Is that John O'Brien happened to grow up in Fairbanks and has had strong connections with Bible Baptist Church. And so I met him about 2 weeks before I left. And when I met him then, I put his number in, and he told me that in Ukraine, they use a different type of phone messaging system called Viber. So I got hooked up into that, downloaded that, got his number in there. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be able to sit at the border and just punch his number up in Ukraine and call him. But I called him and said, here's the trouble. I've got to give this to a Ukrainian registered NGO. So he said, we've got one. It's called HEAL Corp. HEAL stands for Health, Education, and Liberty. and it's run by some Americans and a Canadian and 20 other people. So anyway, but after contacting them, they sent the Border Customs people a letter on their stationery, very formal looking, saying they hereby accept the gift of this ambulance from Tom Wickwire to Heel Corp. So between those two communications, I give it to them and they accept it. Then the Ukrainian customs borders finally let me go. And that was after 22 hours of dealing with them and waiting for answers back and sleeping in the ambulance the second night at the border.
Let me pause here for a second too and say you teamed up with somebody else and decided, let's get an ambulance to go in there and try to help the Ukrainian people. Correct?
Yes.
And so you're going with that ambulance to make a difference in people's lives, whether it saves lives. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, more than that, I wanted that ambulance to be used as an ambulance. Before I went there, I thought, I'm taking an ambulance into a country that's at war. What will I be doing? And I thought, well, probably the worst that I'd be asked. I get there and I'm 30 to 50 miles from the war zone, and people say, great, we got an ambulance. We'll put 2 medics in there. And we've got some wounded people that need to come back, either soldiers or civilians. And we got to run in there, get them back to a hospital. But we got no driver. Will you drive? And if they'd asked me that, I'd have said yes. That's what I thought I might be running into. But what I ran into, because this was already going to Kherson, where there's other Americans were there, was a nice, pretty quiet town or city that had been liberated from the Russians in November, and now life was pretty much as normal. People walking around, going to shopping and visiting friends, and setting up their outdoor little food stores, and junior high kids playing soccer, and women taking care of their gardens, and almost nobody wearing a flak vest. And the closest I could get as any evidence that this country is at war from Kherson was every day there'd be certain pops that were probably a kilometer or so away from me. And those were either incoming mortars or missiles that were hitting someplace else, closer to the river, most likely. And I was on the west side of town. Or I later learned they could have been outgoing interceptor missiles to intercept the incoming and blow them apart before they get to their target. But anyway, there's several pops per day, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes 10 or 15. But then other than that, Kherson looked like it was a nice living as normal city, which that I can't say I disliked it because it was still an experience being there, but it wasn't what I expected. I wanted that ambulance used for what ambulances are for, closer to the war zone. So I was kind of disappointed with that. But anyway, it took me a while to work on contacting people that John O'Brien knew and work towards getting the ambulance moved to where it is really working as an ambulance. Before I left, I thought this would be one trip. I'll go and deliver the ambulance and it'll be used and I'll work with it for a week or two. I was there for about 2 weeks and then I'll come home and that'll be the end of it. But by the time I got back, I thought, I want to go again. Probably in the fall, because by 3 or 4 months from now, we'll know a lot more about how the war progresses and where the ambulance is needed most. And then I'll be communicating with this Heel Corp in how best to train medics to go with ambulances. And as I understand it, they've got an order on for more ambulances, like I think a dozen of them.
It's currently in country, in Ukraine.
Yes.
And God's working to get that right to where it needs to be for being able to help people.
Yes, and at the time, the war is changing so fast as to where the actual combat zones are. Is that
right.
From day to day, we don't know where it's needed. But this Heel Corp, which is the company that John O'Brien is familiar with and connected with, day to day, he'll know where it's needed most, and I'll just defer to him on where it should be given once its immediate need in Kherson is solved and getting it to where
this stuff is doable. Being able to go over and make a difference in individual people's lives. I think this is a good time to touch on if you watch the news in America and you see what media has to say about it. As far as they're concerned, it's gone from an immediate need in Ukraine to where they're all corrupt and all they're doing is taking our tax dollars. And the attitude and the sentiment on Ukraine has definitely changed. But I've said in previous podcasts, and I'll say it again right now, what does that have to do with the poor person on the street who is under the abuse of the constant aspects of war, the shelling? And if you go to J&J Podcast to the website, we have some pictures there and some stuff that'll break your heart. And somebody like Tom got up, went over there to try to make a difference in individuals' lives. And that's what this podcast is meant to do, is trying to motivate people to show that, hey, it is doable. You can go to Ukraine, you can make the difference, and you can actually save people's lives.
What I saw that impressed me that were surprises was that there, at roadblocks, there are soldiers, and they're all heavily armed, and some of them are women. They're armed just as much as the men are. And then I also saw that in Kiev, they're building new skyscrapers, and Kiev is getting shelled, but most of the incoming mortars or missiles are being intercepted and cut off, so they don't do any damage. And life in Kiev is very much like normal, at least as far as I could see. It's close to normal. People are driving around, walking around, going every place else. And the country is about two-thirds, the western two-thirds of the country is being actively farmed by people. That tells me that by fall time, it's harvest, they expect to harvest what they planted. They have no belief that this country is going to be taken over by the Russians. They are completely committed to winning this war, but they need a lot of help. And so there are a lot more Americans there than I thought that just showed up to help wherever they could without really much of a plan.
Really?
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Some of them didn't even have an organization they're connected to. They just came over and showed up in Kyiv and thinking that they'll find something to do where they're useful. That was impressive. Another thing that was impressive is I talked to 3 or 4 people that were working mostly in restaurants or stores who worked 7 days a week. And I was surprised at that. And I asked them, you really work 7 days a week? Some of them 10-hour days? They said, yes. And that's very common in Ukraine for civilians, because that's part of how much they feel that during the war, they have to put out extra effort, even as civilians, because the whole country is united in doing that.
Wow.
So that really impressed me, that in America, you just don't find that.
No.
But that's...
Of course, we're not being bombed either.
That's true. That's true. They know that they've got to put out everything they've got, and it's common for civilians to be working 7 days a week. That was impressive, too.
Wow. Yeah. How far east did you make it?
They call it Kyiv instead of Kiev because they're getting away from the Russian pronunciation.
Yeah,
it used to be Kiev, now it's Kyiv.
That's interesting. I did not expect. I know there's soldiers. I've talked to individual soldiers that have gone there and done in the military, retired military, and just jump in to go help. And it's like, wow. And early on, that was the big deal. More so now, it's getting back to people are trying to do individual acts, trying to help individual get over there, help out some people directly, and that's kind of what we're geared to as a podcast too. Is we want to all donations, anything that comes in, and it always has been since day one, 100% of everything that comes in, we directly target to the missionaries.
But one of the things I think, I'm one person, and I went over there thinking, as one person, I can do what I can do when I see an opportunity. And I saw 2 of them. One of them was, I was talking to a man who was in his probably late 20s, early 30s. And I asked him, his name was Alec. And I asked him, where do you live and why are you here? And he said, well, he used to live in Denmark, and he was a seaman on a ship that went out supplying the oil rigs. He didn't say what his pay was, but I'm sure he was making a lot of money. And he said when the war started, he just quit and came back to Ukraine, and he lived in Kherson. And he has a wife and a child. And I asked him, what does he have for income? And he says, well, right now he doesn't have any income until he's in the reserves. If called up in the Army, he'll start getting paid. But he's just living on his savings, and the savings are dwindling. So I decided, well, this man deserves it. So I gave him a little money. And another man I met was a mechanic that we hired to change the oil in the ambulance because it was black. I didn't know when it had been changed soon, but I figured, got to change the oil. So we had to get the oil in the filter and find a mechanic, and went over the mechanic. He was knowledgeable, and he worked really hard at finding the filter and getting it off. We were there for about an hour and a half, and his toolbox looked like a normal size fishing tackle box. It was just a pitiful set of tools. I know amateurs that have got 10 times as much tools as he's got. So I had an opportunity to go to one of these big sort of the Ukrainian version of Walmart. So I bought him a nice tool set and had it taken back to him.
Oh.
So by the time, then I got a picture of him with the tool set with a big smile on his face. So, okay.
That works.
That justifies my trip right there. That guy, his job will be a lot easier now that he's got a decent set of tools.
Wow. Amen. That's what it all boils down to. Individuals. Mm-hmm. So you did mention earlier, you would go back in a heartbeat.
I do firmly intend to go back this fall.
What do you hope to accomplish?
I don't know, because the war will have changed, I think, a substantial amount. I certainly hope that Ukraine will be making advances all summer, and that I'll be able to communicate with these people at Heal Corp about what I may be able to do. And they said that, well, yes, you can be useful as well. Let me know how. So we're going to be talking about that over the summer, so that when I go back, I'll have some reason to be going back. But right now, things are changing so fast, I don't know what I'm going to be doing.
It's interesting that I know when I came to Alaska back in the early 90s for myself, coming out of New York and coming out of Western New York, and the Western New York people, missionaries I bumped into up here already. And it's like, wow. And it's like, it's the same thing with Ukraine. The group of people out of Alaska that are being effective over in Ukraine and just dealing with it and bumping into Tom has been a pleasure. The big push the missionary was looking for people to help deliver food and humanitarian stuff over out of Kharkov. And it was wintertime, and he's looking for people with experience driving on ice and snow. Hello, here we are from Alaska. We do that 7 or 8 months out of the year. And it just fit in. And so, Tom, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And we look forward to hearing where God might take you again in the future over there in Ukraine and helping out. And we just want to tell you, thank you for your heart. And thank you for loving the Lord.
And I'm comfortable with that, not having a clear plan of what I'm going to do in October. Which is
You're flexible?
That's what the Lord wants. His people just say, I'll go if you lead in where I'm going. So I got 4 months, and the Lord will come up with some plan. If he wants to use me, he'll have a plan, and it'll come together to where I'll know that I can be useful, and the Lord will have me going with a purpose, and he'll protect me.
Let me ask you a side note here. Do you feel God has anything bigger calling for you over there?
Well, possibly. My whole life, God has had much bigger plans for me than I had for myself.
Interesting how that works out, isn't it?
Yeah. Some of mine were small, and I tried hard to do them, and the Lord shut them off because he had something much bigger for me.
Let's help people put some stuff into perspective here. So Tom, you're half retired?
Yes, about.
Yeah. So you're half retired when you're spending your time on your time off that you'd be willing to go and travel and help out with the missionaries or help out with anybody the need over in Ukraine.
Yes, the Lord has given me that capacity.
I touch on those things because of people listening to this podcast. I'm still trying. We're trying to reach into the pews, and it's doable. But Tom, you're a retirement age. You should be just kicked back. These are your golden years, and just take it easy.
Well, I'm the kind of I can't just retire and play golf or get a sailboat or something. I have to have something to do.
I'll go to Ukraine.
It either has to be really fun or important. And right now, again, I think I said that if I live to be 150, I want to be able to say, when people ask, what were you doing during the Ukraine war? If it turns out to be like World War II, I don't want to say, I was comfortable and I stayed home because I don't want to take any chances. And I remember Shakespeare had a saying, the only thing man has never survived is security.
Exactly.
that resonates with me.
So, can I ask how old you are?
79.
Wait, 79 years old, and you're going to Ukraine with the ambulances? And
Yeah. In fact, I'll have to edit my late Christmas letter that I sent out to just about everybody I know, saying, with the war going, if I were younger, I'd probably be going to Ukraine. So now I kept a journal and took a bunch of pictures, and I'm working at getting that typed up and then having somebody help me stick the pictures into where they go in the text. So I'll have to start out with, sorry, but I lied on my last newsletter by saying I'm not going to Ukraine because I went to Ukraine and I'm going back.
79 years old. It's never too late. It's never too late.
That's right. Well, the Lord has blessed me. As long as I got the strength and the ability to go, I'm supposed to be going and moving and doing something.
Tom Wickwire doing what he can do. Thank you, Tom, for taking the time.
Oh, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it. Look forward to talking to you again. Awesome. This podcast is for preachers, missionaries, and laymen. If you wish to contact us, you can reach us at jjpodcast.com or email us at info@jjpodcast.com. If you're a current missionary on the field or on deputation and have something you can share with us, please feel free to reach out to us. If you're a pastor and have some insight that you can share with these missionaries to help them, please feel free to reach out to us. If you're in a pew and have a subject you would like to have discussed, please feel free to email us at info@jjpodcast.com. That's info@jjpodcast.com.